This is SSN
Story Studio Network.
I'm Tom Hoppy, and I'm your host of the Most Painful Podcast. On our last episode, we spoke to Andrew Thomas about the benefits of cold water therapy and how it can help with metabolic health, inflammation, and some pain. If you missed this episode, you can listen to it on our Spotify and Apple feed. So, we know that many Canadians don't have a family doctor, which can create some barriers to access other healthcare services. Canadian veterans who leave the service also do not have any family doctors. And for a veteran to be successful to secure any VAC benefits, that's Veterans Affairs Canada benefits for injuries, the veteran needs to have a family doctor to fill out assessments or to provide referrals in order to complete all the assessment documentations in order for that veteran to be successful with the application process, all of which can impact transition. So there is a program out there, and we're going to talk about that. Today I'm joined by retired General Jean-Marc Lanthier to provide some insights to the release journey from the CF, Canadian Forces, and a service that can help veterans who don't have family doctors. Jean-Marc, welcome to the show.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, because we're in a different time zone, but it's a pleasure to be here with you today and to share a little bit of my knowledge and experience when I transitioned from the Canadian Armed Forces following a medical release a few years ago. So that's, I'm from a position of advantage in the sense that so the service I will talk to you about today, the Veteran Family Telemedicine Service, is hosted by the Canadian Forces Morale and Welfare Service. It's a program that's subsidized or funded by Veterans Affairs Canada. And I'm privy to know a bit more than the average bear because I'm on the audit committee for the non-public property of the Canadian Armed Forces. So it'll be my pleasure to kind of share with you this afternoon, my journey, even though I did not personally to resort to this service, but I certainly have a bit of knowledge about it.
Yeah, and I think that would be good because when we talked about it in Halifax, I was not even aware of it. So that's the first I heard of it. So that I think that's why it's important to get the information out there for veterans, even for non-veterans to understand it because they may know somebody who could benefit from this. But I think, we talk about release journeys, and a lot of times we're hearing it that I've heard on this podcast is mostly from NCOs. So it'd be interesting to hear your story and then how that leads into this program or your involvement in this program. So maybe you can start us off with that.
So I'm an armored officer. I joined in '89. I'm from the Ottawa region, so I did my degree at U of O, and then I joined the Armored Corps. It seemed like a great place to work. The recruiting officer was a 12-month Indians Canada officer, and he kind of steered me in my choice. But I loved it. Served 31 years in the forces. I joined a Francophone regiment, being Francophone, so I did multiple tours of duty in the province. Commanded my regiment, commanded the brigade, commanded the division, so all of that in the province of Quebec. But I had 15 posting through my career. I served in, as I said, multiple places in Quebec and Gagetown and Kingston and Ottawa, 2 years in the UK and 2 years in the US as an exchange officer. I had 6 deployments, 3 times to Bosnia, twice to Afghanistan, including a year-long deployment with the US Army, the First Corps, as an exchange officer. And I was the deputy commander of the task force following the 80 earthquake recovery efforts. Pretty active career, many years in the field on operation an armored vehicle. And, like all young folks, you're told, don't jump down from the tank, don't jump down from the truck. You do all those things, you do a lot of sports. So premature wear and tear on many joints. You throw in all the sport injuries that come also in the military life. So I ended up with neurological issues, osteoarthritis, so herniated discs, the knee, the back. My neck had a couple of pretty good bangs, in the field with a tank and other armored vehicle. So the physical side, I think is very common in the combat arms. You get the wear and tear. But throughout my deployments also, I ended up, from a mental health perspective, experiencing multiple critical incidents. And that had its toll. And after my last tour with the Americans, I started suffering from a nightmare disorder. Waking up pretty much every night with nightmares and screaming. And that lasted for quite a while. It made me constantly tired, affected my resilience, and until it led. When you don't sleep, nothing else goes well. So I ended up with a quite severe depression. So I came in the Army, and I was, suffering from that. Then I became the Vice Chief of the Defense Staff, number 2 in the Canadian Armed Forces. Pretty busy job, pretty important job. And I noticed, this is a job where you're constantly in meeting. You spend your life in meeting, and then you do your the rest of the work outside those normal working hours. And I was getting really, really irritated. I was not tolerant. I was getting mad, and that's not me. I'm the kind of guy who likes to joke and smile, and if it's worth doing it, let's do it well. So I realized that that wasn't working for me anymore. And I decided that I would take my release. And I was not seeking a medical release at that point. As a general officer, if you've spent 30 years, it's considered time, it's 5A, the exact criteria I can't remember, but time completed or service completed is the thing I came. But the chief of the defense staff, I saw him regularly every single day, had me sit down with Surgeon General because he had noticed I was changing and things weren't working super smooth. And they decided after a couple of meetings that I needed a 3B release for medical, mostly for the mental health. So that's what led to my release in 2020, July 2020. I released from the Canadian Armed Forces under 3B. And I worked till the 15th of July. I was the Vice Chief of Staff, Defense Staff, and on the 17th, we moved down to Nova Scotia in the middle of COVID. So we're foreigners in Canada. Nova Scotia had a very tight approach to folks originating from Ontario. So we arrived in Nova Scotia, and we couldn't even go in the hotel we're supposed to be while we were waiting for a house to be ready. So we ended up staying in a relative of my wife's house, which was empty. It was her aunt that just passed away from cancer. So we stayed there, and there we go. We're now in July 2020 in Nova Scotia, and starting the new, the new retirement life. So how do you access healthcare when you switch province? There's a couple of things I did not do well. I would say the first thing is you can apply for your provincial healthcare card the minute you receive your release message. So that's ahead of the actual release date. It's once you receive your release message. So you apply, you do the process in the province or territory you are, and you get your card. It takes a couple of weeks, sometimes a bit longer. It would have been longer in those years with COVID. But then you get your card, and when you switch province, you apply for the new one. Well, your originating province card is still valid, and it's being honored. So because I took retirement leave, I had 3 months of coverage. So I had access, the Canadian Armed Forces doctor. So that was very helpful for me, but it's not everybody. A lot of folks will cash their leave or do other things. But that's the first thing you got to do. And it's, to be honest, when I did my transition interview, with the release clerk, it didn't even mention that. It was not in the package I got. Or if it was, I didn't pay attention, or my staff didn't brief me. No, I'm going to blame the staff. But that's the first thing you got to know. The second thing you got to know is, and that's really the key message today, is what is the Veteran Family Telemedicine Service? So it's recognized that in Canada, the province is responsible for healthcare. And if you're in the military, you don't realize that personally because you always have access to healthcare. Your family lives it every time they switch around. I think my wife is still on the waiting list from Montreal from I don't know how many years ago to access family doctor. But if you are released medically, it is so critical to access care, as you mentioned in your introduction, that you have to have access to a family doctor. I was so fortunate that a good friend of mine, I confided in him, told him my situation. He got me under his family doctor. 99.9 of folks don't have that advantage. And that's where that was recognized and through the pandemic, we made great leaps in technology. And that's when telemedicine started really kicking off. So Veterans Affairs is funding a program that's administered, or I should say delivered, by the Canadian Forces Mobile Welfare Service called the Veterans Family Telemedicine Service. And that's what I want to talk about. So I've just had a big, long spurt there. So if you have any questions or remarks there, Tom, please pitch in.
Yeah, no, I think that's, and we will get into the telehealth program, but I think it's important for people to understand the release process too and transition. Because I mean, you're coming from a different perspective where, and I think a lot of, and this is a good opportunity because I have not interviewed, at least on this podcast, somebody who's worked at that senior level. So you have completely different stresses that are there too, that people don't understand or see that can impact a person when they're working, but also there are some opportunities for when you do your transition as well. So maybe you can kind of just talk a little bit about, because in a command position, even like someone in a CEO position, I think a lot of people don't realize or understand the amount of pressure that is in a position like that. Because you talk about going to meetings every day, constantly, but there's also you're looking after over 100,000 some odd people, in a sense.
Yeah. So thanks for that opportunity. So I was the vice chief of defense, and I've been talking about commander of the Canadian Army, but the vice chief is a different beast. So you're doing many things, right? You're the number 2 of Canadian Armed Forces. You're the chief of staff for National Defense Headquarters. You're an advisor on many things. You work extremely closely with deputy ministers. You have literally 2 bosses. You have the deputy minister of national defense. You have the chief of the defense staff. You're also a level 1 commander yourself. There's 15,000 people that report to you as the vice chief of staff. Like the Army commander's got 50,000. The vice has got 15,000. I used to call it the purple dustbin. What doesn't fit neatly anywhere? You give it to the vice. You'll give it to Mikey. Well, you give it to the vice. Because the military police group doesn't fit neatly somewhere, the reserves doesn't neatly fit somewhere, or the cadets, or all the outcans, all of that. So typical day, is you get in the office probably after PT at 7 a.m. You do the urgent emails that happen because you're working internationally as the vice. So, there's always the time difference. You'll get things at any time of day or night. So you clear your inbox, and literally governance meeting starts around 8:30 in the morning and rarely stop before 5 p.m. At 5 p.m. you come out, your EA will kind of go, you'll have a summary of all those key emails you got to address, those key files. And then you start doing the thinking and the doing, and you do that for a couple of hours, and that's 5 days a week. And then on the weekend is when you do your deep thinking, because as the vice chief, you got to think the long game, the future security environment, relationship with the allies. So you're responsible for the budgeting and the business planning of the organization. You're managing so many balls, and all the consequences are there. You're thinking about the near, you're thinking about the middle, you're thinking about the far. You are also responsible for all the attaché, the relationship with all your allies that are based in Ottawa there. So it's a busy job, and the demands are there. So when I left that job, I'll say, and it's not bragging, it was probably a 75 to 80 hours a week job. So when I left, it felt like vacation finally. Because when you're on vacation, it doesn't matter. The BlackBerry keeps going, right? But there I had nothing. It was fun for the first month of weather relief. Second month, okay, that's fine. We bought 4 acres, ranch house, a little farm place. Great. Then fall comes, and then you go, what am I doing with my life now? What's my purpose? And then the rear head of your identity crisis kicks in. What am I going to do? What is this for? What have I done? I was only 53, 54 when I released. So all of that comes together at the same time.
Yeah, and that's interesting because when we talk about transition and the ability to transition successfully, sometimes people in a higher level have more networks, and so there's that perception that they have an easier transition or easier way of getting out and connecting with another identity and moving on. But doesn't sound like that, I guess, eh?
Well, my wife is a very, very wise woman, and she knew if I'd stayed in Ottawa, I would have more job than I could shake a stick at. Well, her family is native from Nova Scotia. My daughter's in the Air Force, was in Greenwood. Her mom, a widow, was in Truro, and we're not far from that, Nova Scotia. She said, you know what? I never actually did a house hunting trip. My wife went on her own. I put in my release early March to the chief. I think 24 hours later, she was on a plane. Just before COVID hit, she bought a house. And she said, "No, we're going to move because we're going to take care of you now." And don't. I can't minimize that. My nightmare disorder affected me, but when you got your partner that wakes up screaming in the bed, 5 nights a week, that had a tremendous impact on her. And she was a pharmacist, so there's implication for her not delivering professionally. So all of that, the impact is on more than you. And again, that's the good thing of the veteran family telemedicine service, because it's for the medically released veteran, but it's also for the family. And it's also for the family of the fallen. They also are able to access that program.
Yeah, so that's I'd love to. I mean, that's not what today's show is about, but it'd be interesting just to talk about that whole identity, because I think sometimes we focus, and I'm going to finish off with that, and then we'll get on to this program. But from my experience, it seems to be heavily focused on the troops who struggle with it, but there's another component that we don't hear much from, and I think it'd be nice to do that bridge there and talk about that at some point. But thanks for sharing that. So let's talk about the telemedicine program, and let's kind of just, how is it formed? How does somebody access it? What's the future look like for it? And I'll probably have some other questions from there, but we'll let you start with that.
Okay. So, the formal name, as I was saying, is the Veteran Family Telemedicine Service. It's managed through CFNWS. It's available to medically released veterans or their family. You have to register for it. You have to register within the year following your release date. And it gives you access to virtual access to doctors, nurse practitioners, and licensed healthcare providers for a period of 1 year. So it's the service provider itself is Maple. So it will be known by many people across the country because it's a national service to Canadians. For everybody, there is normally a service fee associated with using. You register, you got to apply, you got to subscribe, you got to do the financial bit. For the Canadian Forces member that's releasing medically, there's none of that. You register and it's a free service that's available to you and your family. And the goal is to connect you to a doctor online, or an health practitioner within 5 minutes or so. That doctor may not be in your province. It's a Canadian-wide program, but will have the ability or the resources to access somebody who has prescribing rights in your province or territory. So if you need a prescription, because they can do that, then they can give you access to that. And there's even a service where actually your prescription can be delivered at home. You don't even have to pick them up, but that's a subset of it. The other big advantage, completely bilingual, so it doesn't matter where you are. You can be a francophone that's released in Wainwright. You don't have to worry. You and your family can have access to French speaking if that's your language of preference for medical issues, to a French speaker practitioner. So it's a pretty great service, and it's pretty easy to register. There's really two ways to do it. One of it is you click on the link that they give you, and then you have to put in your name, your release date for medical reason, your last three of your service number. Then that gets validated. Once validation comes back, then you finish the registration. Or even easier, if you're near a family resource center, you can go there. They have every resource center as a veteran family program coordinator, their position. And then with that, when you CF1 number, they do the process, they do the initial screening, they help you. If you don't have that, you can also use the family information line that's available, the 1-800 number, and they can assist you. So it's a pretty straightforward, but very, very few folks know about it. To be honest, I did not know about it. It wasn't, even though I was releasing medically, it wasn't even presented to me. And I'd been part for, at least, 3 years before I released. I was a member of the non-public property board. So I'll call it the CFMWS board in the HQ. I was a member of that board, and I never even heard of the program. So there's a big, I'm not going to say marketing, but public awareness campaign. Yeah, communication here is something that's got to work better. And that's why we're doing the podcast.
Well, that's one of the reasons we're doing it. And then hopefully, the transition unit, hopefully that's passed on to them so that they're able to give it to people. So you said it's only good for 1 year. So is there any discussion or idea of expanding this program to, say, we have a lot of veterans who have released a number of years later, they require, to apply to VAC, or they require a family doctor in order to complete forms because they have an injury. Is there going to be something available for those people that have been out for some time and they're now in contact with VAC and they need a family doctor, but they can't get one?
As everything in the bureaucracy is related to, it comes down to money. So this service started out really to address the most pressing needs. And the most pressing need at that point was the immediate need of the medically released folks. But it was recognized from the get-go that all veterans face that issue, not just the medically released one. So there are discussions between VAC and Armed Forces, Finance, Treasury Board, CFMWS. How do we expand the program so that more folks have access to the program for a longer period? 1 year in most provinces, you do not get access to a doctor. It's often a couple of years. So I'm aware. I'm not at liberty to discuss, but I'm aware that those discussions are ongoing.
Yeah, because that's a big barrier that we hear from veterans a lot is, they need to have these forms completed for VAC. They can't get a family doctor, and it's a barrier for them to move forward. They're kind of stuck in that limbo. And we also know that there's a number of doctors who do not have the time to fill out these very cumbersome forms as well. And that's another issue that hopefully maybe could be helped by the teleservice. So we're at the end of the episode, but I think it's important that people understand there is a service for people who are releasing, and hopefully that'll get communicated better with the transition service. And maybe there's hope for something for people who've been out for a bit and require the help of a family doctor to access care. But I do appreciate you sharing your story. Like I said, I'd love to dig into it deeper because I think it'd be good knowledge to just have a talk between the two different streams of leaving the forces at different levels. I think that's something, as far as I know, I could be wrong, that hasn't been discussed. And I think it's, like I said, a bridge that needs to be built because I think it's important to share that knowledge. So I appreciate being on the show.
Thank you, Tom. Just a little plug for Transition Center. They just released last week a message where they've completely revamped the transition briefing package and approach in 3 different streams. So that's brand new on the street, and hopefully that will also help addressing that. If I can take 30 more seconds for one point that's critical for the health services provided by the telemedicine service is you never get access to the same doctor twice. And that's a frustration. But I want folks to be aware that you can actually upload into the Maple system your medical file. So when you leave, make sure you have the electronic copy of your medical record so you can upload it. So the doctors can actually consult, understand your history, and do the required follow-up. Even though it's a different doctor, the notes will be in your file. So that's a very important point to know.
Yeah, no, thank you. And Yeah, because that is a frustration. I mean, even if someone goes to a walk-in clinic, they're never going to get the same doctor. So being an advocate, which now makes me think we should do another show on being an advocate in the healthcare system. And we're actually with Andrew Ferlin is going to talk a little bit about that when your doctor doesn't believe you have chronic pain. So we're going to talk about that. So that'll be on this season's show as well. So look forward to that. Well, Jean-Marc, thanks for being on the show and sharing that story. For our next show, we're going to be talking to Dr. Brenda Lau about brain health. That's very important. A lot of research has come out in that, and we know that with chronic pain, mind and body are interconnected, so that'll be an interesting discussion. So for feedback about the show or for more information on chronic pain, you can visit our website, veteranschronicpain.ca, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter at chronicpaincoe, and on Instagram at chronicpain_COE. Once again, thanks for the chat today, Jean-Marc. And hopefully the program will expand beyond what it is today because it sounds like a great initiative. For the audience, stay safe and keep the hope alive.
The Most Painful Podcast
is produced for the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence by Story Studio Network.